We are the people of covenant. We practice covenant. And I say practice because do we ever perfect it? No. Those mistakes, those steps away from right relations are actually blessed opportunities for faith formation. I'm not interested in a pretty covenant with all the right words that sits dusty on a shelf. Give me covenant with smudge marks and coffee stains and marked out words and added words and tear stains. Give me a covenant that makes us stretch for a lifetime and into the next generation. People, it is not our 7 principles that makes us Unitarian Universalist. It is our covenant among the people within our congregation, among the congregations in our area, in our wider association, and with the wider world. Our covenant is with the ancestors who came before and the people yet to come. It is with the here and now and the transcendent. It is with our ultimate source. All that. Here ends the reading.
Like a candle that shines in the light, I'll be a beacon that's burning bright. I will carry the light. I will carry the light. Luz eterna.
So I think something important happened in England yesterday. I know many of you watched. I hope to catch some highlights later, especially the hats. My grandmother was a milliner, so, for her. But as a New Englander and a Unitarian, that is to say, an heir of the Puritan Church's rejection of the Church of England, the monarchy is a subject of historical fascination to me, but with some criticism, and of course, as an American, none of my business. But all of that God and King stuff is a very welcome invitation to ask ourselves, if not the crown or the monarch, what is worthy of our allegiance, our loyalty, our reverence? What symbols, what roles, what ideas? I mean, what happens within you when you see the Duke and Duchess? I admit, I did see one photo and I was like, oh my God. The cloak with like the huge medallions. What does that activate in you? It's such an old instinct to kind of go, like this. So we ask ourselves, towards what shall we direct our efforts internally and externally, individually and communally? I think some of you, that I have been working on a book about what I am calling clergy tensions and transitions in the United States, which has seen a remarkable departure of active clergy across denominations. When our own New England regional lead, the Reverend Erica Barron, was speaking at a gathering recently and being asked about ministerial placements, she responded, "You might not get any applicants, and we can make no promises." This is a massive historical shift, especially in New England, where Unitarian Universalist congregations are, within a stone's throw. Clergy are being called out of retirement and out of community settings such as chaplaincy to serve our congregations, which are dwindling in size, closing in some cases, merging programs, and merging altogether. Our board of trustees, if you're on the board right now, will you just raise your hand? I know Mary's back there, and some of you, good, Jim and Nikki. We'll be asking the Unitarian Universalist Association, would you please start producing resources for these realities, as they are very much needed in a time when things are changing rapidly and there's no blueprint to follow. I remember some years ago when our friends in the United Church of Christ, a liberal Christian denomination with the same historical origins as ours, they were the Trinitarians when the Puritan churches had a schism in the early 19th century. If you want to hear more about this, attend the session on UU Foundations after church today. They're also known as the Congregationalists. They had an outrage campaign called God is Still Listening, or God is Still Speaking. I hope God is still listening too. Their logo was a big comma. You may have seen this and remember this. And they had posters that said things like, never place a period where God has placed a comma. And I respect that truth. Institutions that hold on to old ways and fear change stifle creative spirit and possibility. It's not only okay to not know what will happen next, it's an important position to embrace. Do you remember singing in concert choir as a child? You stood up there on the risers in the auditorium, and it got hot. And your choir director, in my case, Mr. Hersey, would always say, don't lock your knees. Keep your knees soft and you won't faint. Sure enough, someone would forget to keep their knees soft and would tip over at the end of the program during the third verse of Shenandoah or whatever it was, and they'd have to be embarrassed on the floor of the auditorium while the adults fussed over them and the rest of us giggled. Oh, Scott Fagan fainted. Keep your knees soft. Look, a black man named Jordan Neely, who was agitated on the New York subway a few days ago, ranting about being hungry and thirsty. He had a history of mental health issues and multiple arrests, which is how it goes for any homeless person with untreated mental illness in American cities. I've been on the New York subway so many times when someone came around hollering and sad and agitated and confrontational. I can't even remember how many times. But what I have never seen is what happened to Mr. Neely. Some soldier of fortune types decided to get him in a chokehold, and they killed him. They just strangled him to death there on the subway with witnesses. And then they weren't even charged with a crime. They weren't taken into custody right away because America is sick, and you know that. So I see this story and the dozens of comments left online by people who've been so indoctrinated into racist panic and vigilante mentality that they're going, well, you know, it's a good thing some heroes were around and on hand to manage this threat. Do you remember what I said a few months ago about the ultra-violence that has infected our society when the first thing we think of is, I wonder what some victim of brutality did to deserve it? This is to illustrate why I believe that the church is absolutely urgently needed and relevant right now. There is no question in my mind, and while the past few years, yes, have been exceedingly difficult for all of us for many reasons, I continue to place my faith and my passion in the church's potential to be a healing, inspiring, righteousness and justice generating source of power in the world. A drag queen signed up to give makeup lessons nearby. Just give makeup lessons, that's all. So much fun, right? I would have loved that for prom when I was in high school. I would love that for me now, period. But hate groups found out about this program coming up, and they are planning to descend upon the venue. I have information about where and when. It's on Wednesday. And if you want to come with me to be part of the quiet counter protest in support of that organization, that individual, and the LGBTQ community, please let me know after the service. I have flyers. I can, text them to you with all the information. The violence, the hysteria, the hatred, the projection is madness. I'm so grateful to Jack Butterworth and Mary Gatlin, who encouraged us to find an abortion fund to support for our 50-50 offering this month. Jack emailed me and Mary, and he said, mifepristone is going to become unavailable throughout much of the country. Is there a way that we can, access some? And we talked about it. And Mary researched, where can we support? That's another crushing form of social control and oppression led by religious zealots right now. I made a generous contribution to the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice this week because people of faith have to be the ones on the front lines fighting Christian fascism in America. The fundamentalists don't respect us. I know that. I've been hearing about that for a long time. But at least we can engage these issues with theological language and hopefully help some people who are swayed by the right-wing rhetoric understand that there are deeply religious and even Bible-based folks who support reproductive freedom and bodily autonomy and privacy for women and anyone with a uterus. With so much going on in the world that begs our engagement as people of progressive values who are committed to spiritual growth in community, and that alone, by the way, growing spiritually in community and trying to do that is a very demanding endeavor. What do we identify as the burning coal at our center that might provide us a focus as a congregation for our immediate future? We know we have some things going on. We have a school construction project that has begun, and that's demanding. But this question of our focus as a congregation is one that the board has been asking itself. It is not the kind of question that we could answer in one meeting or one retreat, and it is not a question best addressed by soliciting a variety of personal opinions. And let me say that again. Discerning congregational priority and direction is not a matter of collecting a variety of personal opinions on surveys. It's got to be collaborative from the start. It has to be conversational, a process that begins with listening together for vision to emerge out of the collective wisdom of people, you, us, who make time to imagine, to reflect, to muse, and to wonder. Notice how not action and outcome oriented those words are. Wonder, muse, imagine. There's a reason for that. Any process that begins with multiple certainties, I think we should do this, will always devolve into debate and competition and lobbying. I love to brainstorm, but before brainstorming, heartstorming. Some years ago, this congregation embarked on a project to become a sanctuary congregation, offering a place to safely live for people in threat of deportation. This gave us a focus for learning, engaging, and organizing around a basic human need and humanitarian value: the right to safety, to not be threatened with deportation from one's home and family for being mired in a bureaucratic process, the right to live free from being criminalized for one's citizenship status. Since then, of course, COVID shifted priorities. Within the immigrant community that was leading and guiding our work, and we have subsequently focused on developing program partnerships with local organizations that share our justice commitments and our eco-consciousness. We have a lot going on, and this church is doing very well in many ways. But it is time to refresh our calling, to determine together what it is beyond each of our personal enjoyment of this community that beckons us, that begs our commitment and courage. Let me ask you then to consider this question. It's a dramatic scenario that I'm putting forth, not meant to create anxiety, but meant to move us to think deeply about what the Unitarian Universalist Church of Greater Lynn exists to be. Here's the scenario. If authority figures showed up at our doors one Sunday and ordered by decree of the state or the nation that this church close its doors and cease operations forever, how would you answer this phrase? This church needs to be here because. I mean, I know what we would initially do. We'd call lawyers, and appeal to the Constitution. But aside from that, okay, it's an imagination, right? It's what do they call that? A thought experiment. This church needs to be here because what? Our challenge, one challenge is for us to go deeper than my friends are here. Because you could see everybody that you know through the church elsewhere. The church is an ancient entity that is a network of relationships between human beings, creation, and the ultimate, vertical or horizontal dimension, vertical dimension, which the ultimate, which some call God. It exists, the church exists both within and outside of the margins of society. It is countercultural. It stands against exploitation. It witnesses to the reality of evil and oppression while upholding an ethic of love, mutual aid, stewardship of earth, and of the values that encourage generations to keep moving along, moving forward with faithfulness and hope through the crisis of living. The church acknowledges the moral dimension of existence and seeks to place ethical concerns foremost in the consciousness of those who voluntarily consent to count themselves among its members and friends. No other organization or institution, however worthy, has this same objective. The church is essential. So that's my broad statement about the church. And I would like to ask you to just give a little bit of thought to that question, that this church needs to be here because. And you know what? If we don't have any brilliant statements this morning, that's okay. We're starting to think about it, to identify a burning ember. We're not answering questions right now. It's just free sharing. So let's just take a minute, maybe, don't play any music, that's okay, you're resting, you're relaxing. Let's just take a moment and see if anything bubbles up for you.
Social justice. Because it's a safe space.
As a relatively wealthy church, we have supported our not-so-wealthy neighbors, particularly in Lynn, through the support of food programs and children's programs.
I feel that our church is a place for comfortable spiritual connection.
Because man and womankind always deals with symbols. And this church symbolizes goodness in the face of evil.
Because for me personally, I would not be attending church if I were not coming here.
Because this is a place where everyone is accepted. Short, tall, big, small, gay, straight, trans, Muslim, Jewish, Catholic, everyone, no matter what, is accepted here, and we all feel it.
Because this is a place where we emphasize consensus building.
Sorry, Kelly, consensus?
Yes, an emphasis is placed on consensus, building consensus in order to move forward with various decisions.
So the democratic process and consensus, or just consensus? Okay, thank you. No, because they are different. They are different. Consensus building. President Mary Gatlin takes the mic.
This is a place that strikes at the heart of the loneliness epidemic.
Oof, oof. Strength, I heard the loneliness epidemic and heart. What was the first part?
It strikes at the heart of it.
Woof.
Sorry, I thought of something else. I think our music is really important too, and it reaches us all on many different levels.
I guess this church answered the question for us that we've been asking ourselves for years of, what is a place that both of us can feel safe and spiritual connection, and that was something we'd been looking for a very long time.
We're glad you're here. So this was just a door to open and walk through for a moment this morning, but I hope that you will continue to reflect on that, because we will be talking more about what kind of priorities, what kind of commitments do we make to support and manifest, oh God, I just used that term, which is such a buzzword, right? Manifest those things that we cherish and that we think this institution can uniquely provide. And I want you to, when you're thinking about it and you're in discernment, focus on the uniquely. And that may call you to learn more about this particular church, which is something we very much welcome all of you to do. And however the board members and I and the staff can facilitate that learning, you let us know and we will provide opportunities. These are some words to close these reflections by Reverend Karen Johnston. Important is how we gather, not that we gather. If we gather but are unkind or dishonest or self-serving, there seems little reason to gather. But if we pay attention to how we gather, how we care for one another, how we live into our interdependence, how we live out our values, then our gathering has deep meaning. It is in this how that we find the heart of covenant, a promise and a commitment to a common good and a greater purpose, returning again and again when we stumble, make mistakes, hurt one another, fall short. Amen.